The night wind sliced through the canyon with a cruel persistence, slipping through seams of clothing and biting bare skin without mercy. The cowboy sat apart from the others, hunched near the edge of the firelight, boots crusted with frost, hands stiff around a tin cup he hadn't bothered to drink from. His horse was tethered close, steam rising from its flanks, but even the animal leaned away from the cold. The fire crackled weakly, its glow barely enough to keep darkness from swallowing the camp whole. Across the flames, the two Apache sisters watched him. Ashki, the elder, moved with quiet certainty as she fed the fire, her dark eyes missing nothing. Nalin, restless and sharp, pulled her blanket tighter and clicked her tongue in annoyance. The cowboy tried to ignore them, pride keeping his jaw clenched, even as his teeth threatened to chatter. He'd slept in worse places, told himself. Cold was nothing compared to bullets. Nalin stood abruptly, boots crunching on frozen ground. "You're freezing," she said, voice cutting through the wind. He shrugged without looking up. "I've been colder." Ashki rose beside her, studying him the way one studies a wounded animal, carefully without pity. "Your hands are shaking," she said. "By morning you won't be able to ride." "That ain't your problem," he muttered. Nalin stepped closer, eyes flashing. "Shut up, cowboy. You're sleeping between us tonight." He looked up then, startled, pride flaring despite the cold. "Now hold on." "It's decided," Ashki said calmly. "The wind will worsen. Wolves are near, and a sick man is a dead man out here." The fire popped loudly, sparks rising as if sealing the judgment. The cowboy hesitated, every instinct screaming against accepting help, especially from strangers. But the cold was winning, creeping deeper into his bones. Slowly he nodded. They settled beneath a shared blanket against the stone wall of the canyon. The sisters lay on either side of him, backs firm, presence steady. No one spoke. The wind howled above them, but it could not reach through the layered warmth. His breathing slowed, the tension easing from his shoulders. For the first time since the chase began, his body unclenched. As sleep took him, the cowboy realized something unsettled, him more than the cold ever had. Not the danger, not the pursuit, but the quiet mercy of two women who owed him nothing and chose to protect him anyway. Morning arrived slowly, the kind that crept in without sound. Pale light spilled across the canyon walls, turning frost into silver dust. The cowboy woke stiff and disoriented, his first instinct to reach for his gun. Then he felt the warmth, steady and real, and remembered the night, the shared blanket. The wind kept at bay. He lay still, listening to the quiet rhythm of breathing beside him. Ashki was already awake, sitting upright and facing the open land beyond the camp. Her posture was calm, alert, as if she had never slept at all. Nalin remained curled on the other side, her hand clenched in the blanket, dark hair falling across her face. The cowboy shifted slightly, careful not to wake her, but she stirred anyway and shot him a sharp look. "You move too much," she said. "Didn't mean to," he replied, voice rough from sleep and cold. Ashki glanced back at him. "You stayed." He nodded. Didn't see a better option. That earned a faint smile from her, brief but genuine. They broke camp quickly, movements efficient, practiced. The fire was buried, tracks brushed away. Whatever danger followed the cowboy, the sisters had no intention of inviting it closer. Horses were saddled, packs secured, and before the sun climbed high, they were riding east through narrow paths that twisted between rock and scrub. As the miles passed, the cowboy found himself talking more than he meant to. He spoke of a job that went wrong, of men who smiled too easily and betrayed faster. He mentioned gold without pride, only fatigue. The sisters listened without interrupting. Without judging, their silence heavier than questions. Near midday, Nalin reined in her horse sharply. She pointed toward a distant ridge where dust rose faintly. Against the sky, riders, two, many to be friendly. Ashki's expression hardened. "They're searching." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "They're after me. I'll draw them away." Nalin wheeled on him, fury flashing in her eyes. "You won't." He frowned. "Why not?" "Because you slept between us," she said. "That means you're not alone anymore." Ashki nodded in agreement. "We choose another path." They turned into a narrow canyon, barely wide enough for the horses, shadows swallowing them as they pushed forward at a hard pace. Hooves struck stone, breaths came fast, but the riders never followed. When night fell again, the cold returned, sharp and familiar. This time no one argued. The blanket was shared as if it had always been meant that way, and trust settled quietly between them like a second fire. The third night felt different from the ones before it. The land had begun to soften, the sharp stone giving way to juniper and low grass, the wind calmer as if the world itself had finally decided to let them rest. They made camp beside a narrow stream that whispered over smooth rocks, its sound steady and comforting. The fire burned strong, tall enough to push back the dark, and for once the cold did not feel like an enemy waiting to strike. The cowboy sat close to the flames, hat tipped back, staring into the fire as if searching for something he'd lost long ago. His shoulders no longer carried the same tightness, and the constant habit of scanning the shadows had eased. Ashki noticed this as she worked, her movements unhurried, her gaze thoughtful. Nalin, meanwhile, tossed a small stick into the fire and smirked at him. "You still don't know how to camp properly," she said. "You'd freeze again without us." He huffed a quiet laugh. "You're probably right." Silence followed, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Above them, the stars spread wide and clear, brighter than he'd ever seen, as if the sky were making a promise. He leaned back on his hands, eyes fixed upward. "I didn't think I'd feel safe again," he admitted. "Not after everything." Ashki sat beside him, her voice calm. "Safety doesn't come from the absence of danger. It comes from who stands with you when danger is near." Her words stayed with him as they lay down for the night. The blanket was shared again, the arrangement familiar now, no longer forced by cold or necessity. The stream murmured nearby and the fire crackled low. Sleep came easily, without fear, without the weight of pursuit pressing on his chest. At dawn, the world was washed in gold. Mist rose from the water, and birds stirred in the trees. Ashki stood at the edge of the camp, studying the horizon. "This is as far as we go," she said. The cowboy understood. Beyond this point, their paths were not the same. He saddled his horse slowly, reluctant in a way he didn't expect. When he turned back to them, he tipped his hat, respect clear in the gesture. "You saved my life," he said simply. Nalin crossed her arms. "Try not to waste it." He smiled, then rode away, the sound of hooves fading into the morning. The cold no longer followed him. What remained was warmth, earned, shared, and carried forward into whatever waited beyond the horizon.